Hello and welcome to In a Spiritual Sense, where we discuss all things spiritual. From growing your intuition, speaking with spirit guides, diving into past lives, the paranormal, and more, join me, Stacey Piagno, where we work to bridge the gap between science and spirit. Hello and welcome back to In a Spiritual Sense. I'm your host, Stacey Piagno, and today I want to break down a concept that not only creates the reality that we live in, but it's a concept that can either give us power or take it away. Today I want to talk about belief and the science behind how it works and how it integrates into our lives. Because if we truly want to end our suffering, we must understand that our suffering is tied to the belief systems we hold. And I'm not just talking about surface level beliefs, but the deeply rooted structure we create for ourselves in our reality and in this physical life. Today, I want to bring to the surface the beliefs that we hold deep within us and are often unaware of. So with that, we're going to dive into the cause of why we adopt certain beliefs and how to release ourselves from them to obtain what it is we prefer. And by understanding the science behind how belief works, we will learn to transmute and manifest these beliefs to help us attract the life we desire and further step into our power and alignment. Now, this idea of belief systems began to enter into my mind as things usually do, and I found myself curious about this whole topic. And I've been on this path recently where if there's something that I'm curious about, I have to first do my own internal research through meditation and automatic writing, and making sure I don't read about something too much until after I have internally connected with it. So I'm actually going to start today's episode by sharing with you a recent channeling I received during a meditation that explains the whole concept of belief itself and the potential power we have if we can understand how belief systems integrate into our lives. And so the creation of this episode came about through one, this very channeling that I'm about to share with you, and two, it was the night before I channeled this where I walked into my office and it was late at night and I was just going to clean up a little before bed. And the second I walked in the door, there was this little shimmer coming from one of the books on my shelf titled The Biology of Belief. And I've never read this book before. I've never even opened it. I think my mom gave it to me along with a few others for filler on my shelf. And I thought maybe one day I'll read it, maybe not. And so anyways, I walked straight to it, picked it up and read the title and thought, hey, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And I took it as a sign and placed it out on my desk to look into. And it was the very next morning when I woke up, went into a meditation, and began writing. And so as I read this, I'm going to go really slow because it's very in-depth and very word-specific. And towards the end, I'm going to walk you through some of my questions I asked Spirit in regards to what they shared with me. And I'm really going to open up today and share a few of my internal struggles with the belief systems that I currently hold for myself. And I debated on if I would share that with you or not because it is a little personal, but I think it will be a good exercise to share with you because as I learn to work through some of my conflicting beliefs, I'm hoping in return it will help you do so and provide a tangible example of how it works for me. Okay, so again, this is going to be super in-depth. And I'm going to read it really slow. And towards the end, I'll do my best to commentate on if it's me or Spirit talking. Again, on some level, it's all the same, but there's a bit of back and forth towards the end. So I started by asking to learn more about belief systems, and this is what I got. By having belief systems, we become more grounded in our reality, which is an important step for you to grow in this very physical world. By working through your belief systems, you will eventually evolve to accept all beliefs as the total truth. But one must first go on the ride of karma to understand how the belief system works to then be able to manipulate it. Belief systems are extremely important to the physical world in which you were placed because they keep you immersed in your reality. For not, you would be in spirit. But it serves the overall expansion of consciousness to understand the power of belief. Your belief systems, once understood, can be a tool in which you use to create what it is you prefer. For if you find something you do not prefer, it will be directly tied to a belief within you. You work with your beliefs by first bringing awareness to them. When you bring awareness, however, it must be from a place of unattachment. For not would result in you not observing that belief, but instead using that belief. Meaning, if you cannot detach from the belief itself as you are observing it, then you are not truly observing it, which will therefore not allow you to work with or manipulate that belief. A belief is a perspective that you choose to adopt and integrate into your life. The belief of good and bad, the belief of success or doubt, the belief of what is true versus what is not, even though in our reality it is all that is true. Once we understand the power of truth itself, that every belief and perspective is all in existence, therefore all true, then we will realize the power we hold by choosing our beliefs. Oftentimes, due to your physicality, you have been raised with much more structure than when in spirit. And as a result, structured mindsets will play a role in shaping you as you evolve. But once each soul is ready, they will step out of the illusion that there are right and wrong beliefs and transform to the understanding of truth, which will allow them to redesign their system to one that is more serving to that individual. When an individual has a complete understanding of this concept, they will hold the power to free themselves from suffering, because suffering in itself is a belief, and it does not have to be adopted unless that individual has decided it benefits them. And sometimes, even if it does not appear, going through suffering will in return teach you that you do not want to suffer. So suffering does have its value by teaching you what it is you do not prefer. But one must first come to realize it is but a belief. A belief has no physicality. It is but a seed of energy that, if adopted, will manifest into your reality. I'm not enough. That is wrong. That triggers me to be angry or scared or hurt. Have you ever asked yourself why it is that thing makes you angry or scared or hurt? When we trace back the reasons, we will find that it is due to a belief system that you have adopted for yourself. Whether it was adopted from others in your environment, or adopted from the environment itself, meaning the interactions or situations you have encountered from that around you, no matter what it was adopted from, once we bring this into our awareness, we will then see it has no hold over us. Because a belief is nothing more than a seed for manifestation. A belief itself does not exist until adopted. For every situation, there is an equal and opposite situation in existence. For if there was not, the opposing situation would not be able to exist. This is how duality is used for creation. Once there is an awareness of one concept, there must be that of the opposite that has formed. Because if not, the original concept would not hold meaning. The concept of good is only in existence because we have that which is bad to help us understand what is good. In order to feel hurt, there must be a version of your reality in which you are not hurt, so that the hurt itself can be in existence. And if one can understand the paradox of this, then one can choose to adopt the opposite manifestation if they so prefer. Because the opposite of any situation is in existence. Because energetically, in order for there to be a situation in which you don't prefer, the opposite must also be present. Which you choose to adopt will be based on your consciousness of this concept, the awareness of the belief systems you currently have adopted. So, after this, I then come in and ask, but how do I just simply adopt a new belief? How is it that easy? Spirit says, by pinpointing the root of why you believe something in the first place. Only then can it be transformed. Now, I have a bit more, but I want to interject here and explain that I now started to think about how this played into my life and some of the concepts I'm still working on within myself. And so I asked Spirit, what is it with me and feeling judged? Because maybe I've mentioned it, maybe I haven't, but at times I'm really fearful of being judged. And on top of that, I really feel I have a need to prove my thoughts to people. Or if I get in a debate with someone, I really have a need to prove to them where I'm coming from so I can feel understood. And mind you, a bit of background on me. I've spent this whole life playing men's baseball. I'm one of a small pool of female who play, and I have been raised to prove myself in this environment that was not always accepting. And it's very competitive. And I'm very thankful that I've had all the opportunities that I have had. And honestly, I have been treated really good, but I've also been treated badly. And I've always held the feeling of everyone's watching me, everyone's waiting for me to screw up. I have to prove them wrong. And although this has had its place and it's motivated me, it still lingers in my subconscious. And I've been raised with these feelings since I was 5 years old. And I'm 33, so you do the math. So that's literally my entire background to this physical life. So these beliefs I'm working on, it makes sense. But also when it comes to me being open about my spiritual beliefs, and past lives and working with energy and herbs and talking about ghosts and tarot and anything that falls under this, I'm so closed off about it to many people. And it's because I feel like I'm going to get judged or made fun of or disrespected. So with that background, I continue to ask why this is such a thing for me. What's up with me feeling judged? Where does this come from? How can I get to the bottom of it? And how can I deal with it? And this next part is a lot of mental back and forth between Spirit and I, but I wanted to share it because I think it's helpful, and I think by the end you'll get my point. So I continued to channel. You came from a past where you were once judged for being yourself, which, by the way, I think we've probably all felt. It continues. You were criticized into thinking your beliefs and actions were wrong. You know this in the mind, but you must feel it to release it. You must unadopt the belief of right and wrong. When others make you feel wrong, it hurts you. Why? I answer because I want to be understood. Why? Because I wasn't understood in the past. I felt the need for approval from the masculine, which is not necessarily a human man, but more so the structure of the mind. And it does just so happen that I wanted approval from physical men as well. But again, this is very much coming from my mental state as well. So I continue to ask and think about how I want acceptance. Spirit says, why do you not feel accepted now? They say, it's because your belief is that you are not accepted. You have trained yourself that others do not accept you. Therefore, you need to prove this to them so you can be accepted. But why do you need to be accepted? My thoughts are, I always work to accept others, and when I don't get this in return, it hurts because I feel like since I do it, I accept others. Why don't they do it back? Spirit says, because others have different paths than you. They may not be ready or in the same place as you. So you are spending your energy trying to change the beliefs of others when you should be changing yours. You are looking out instead of in. They showed me I need to change my verbiage to, I am accepted, I am already all I'm meant to be. They go on to say, judgment is part of the human condition. In order to be unjudged, there must be judgment itself. So choose what you want to feel. Create your reality. You do not have to understand to choose this. You like to understand before you choose, but it doesn't have to be this way. Trust it and choose it. Manifest the unjudgment by not feeling judged. If others do so, then that is because of their belief systems. It should have nothing to do with yours. Judgment comes from trying to survive. Picking up on the judgment of others may be helpful because it keeps us safe. It's an instinctual property. But as the need for survival diminishes, you can't forget to let this fear diminish as well. Now you understand, so now choose to release it. So that ends the conversation. And this channel is what started the whole idea behind this episode. And along with this, I now also want to shift into more of the science behind belief systems. And a lot of the information in the rest of this episode is actually going to come from that book that I found on my shelf titled The Biology of Belief. It's by Bruce Lipton, and he is a cell biologist. And it's really cool because he relates what he's learned through the study of cells to spiritual principles. And as many of you have started to figure out, what we see in the micros of life, we see in the macros of life, and vice versa. So now let's get into the science behind belief. In Lipton's research, he describes how a single cell is responsible for creating their own physiology and behavior. And unlike what most of us have been taught, it's not the genes of a cell that control its quality of life, but more so the physical and energetic environment of the cell. He describes, quote, "Genes are simply molecular blueprints used in the construction of cells, tissues, and organs. So the purpose of genes is to create. The environment serves as a contractor who reads and engages those genetic blueprints and is ultimately responsible for the character of a cell's life. It is a single cell's awareness of the environment, not the genes, that set into motion the mechanisms of life." Unquote. So basically, cells can think for themselves, and it's the cell's interpretation of their environment that dictates the life they live, not the genes they are born with. So when we relate this to human life, science is basically saying your bloodline, your genetics, all this history of who you are and where you come from is what may have initially created you and given you life, but it is your awareness and your responses to your environment that determines what kind of life you experience. A lot like what we talk about on this show in regards to our perspective. Lipton goes on to explain that his reasoning for sharing this was that he realized he could, quote, "change the character of his life by changing his beliefs." He says he was instantly energized because he realized there was a science-based path that would take him from his job as perennial victim to his new position as co-creator of his destiny, unquote. So a little bit of background in the science world, because I had to brush up on this myself. I know when we were growing up, we were taught a lot about Charles Darwin and how hereditary factors are passed from parent to child. And this is what controls the characteristics of that person's life. And so under Darwin, it was discovered that genes were responsible for physical characteristics, which we know. And then it evolved to genes being the reasoning behind our emotional characteristics and then our behavioral characteristics. And it was basically understood that genes controlled our livelihood. And now I'm not a biologist, but from what I can grasp, it's not that we need to throw out Darwin's research. It's just that science is now reteaching us that these genes we were born with are more or less a starting point for our journeys, but they themselves are not what shape the future of our lives. What shapes the future of our lives is how we view our life. And how we view our life, with our perspectives and our beliefs, is going to create an environment for us to either thrive in or suffocate in, just as we can see with the study of cells. So let's say that you were born with addictive qualities, and this is a quality that has been passed down and is intertwined in your genes. I'm not saying this is going to be easy to overcome. I'm just noticing that it doesn't have to be your fate. And genetics should not be an excuse for the way one's life is if in fact that's something that one is claiming. The mind can overcome any troubling genetic patterns because it is our consciousness of it that allows us to transform it and take control over it. And placing the blame on genetics is actually creating a way more victimizing environment, which will feed and intensify that environment. And this is heavily research-based, not just opinion. Because within the study of cells, we can take the concept of the mind of a cell, the micro, and apply it to the mind of a human, the macro. And as Lipton describes, we can see that it is no longer a debate of nature versus nurture, your genes versus your upbringing, but instead it's proven that the fully conscious mind trumps both nature and nurture. Meaning, the mind, if conscious, can overcome one's genes and one's upbringing and create a new energetic environment that is better suited for that cell's growth, just like our brains creating a better environment for our body's growth. Lipton states, quote, "Using these cell communities as role models, I came to the conclusion that we are not victims of our genes, but masters of our fate," unquote. And this is because of something known as epigenetics, which is the research that proves a cell's environment actually controls the genes versus the genes controlling the environment. And who deems what the environment is like? Well, it's the cell itself that does this. And so in comparison, it is also the human mind, again through perspectives and belief systems, that controls the environment. So what we deem our environment to be, it is. So a cell can be compared and seen as a mini human. Each cell, like each of us humans, has the ability to think for themselves, and their quality of life will be based on how they think. Cells, like humans, are made to survive, and actively seek environments that support their survival, while simultaneously avoiding toxic or hostile ones. Lipton describes that cells will then select appropriate behavioral responses, such as selecting proper mindsets and beliefs, to ensure their survival. And I would say overall, since we humans are not as much in survival mode as we once were, like think back during caveman times, instead of using our mindsets to ensure survival itself, life has begun to transition into using our mindsets for healthier, better quality lives. And this itself is how the evolution of growth works for us. Having better quality lives is something that instinctually the cells within us strive for. Therefore, it is something that we strive for. In addition, cells are also able to learn through their environmental experiences and create cellular memories which can then be passed on and change future genes. So we are constantly changing our own genetics based on how we think and what we believe. And I just want to jump in here and share, this reminds me of when we talk about healing our ancestral traumas and how I used the example of being born with genes that have addictive qualities, and how with our awareness of this and the refusal of being held a victim to it, we can work to changing our perspectives and beliefs, which will then change our environments and therefore recode or alter our genes and the genes we pass on to our children. So I just wanted to share that idea. And there's so many great life principles we can learn from the study of cells and how it relates to human interaction and just the overall consciousness of life. Lipton states, quote, "The more awareness an organism has of its environment, the better its chances for survival or well-being," unquote. So again, the more awareness we have of our beliefs, the better quality of life we will have. Another really good example I wanted to at least touch on is when we discuss health issues that are passed down in our genes, cancer being a really common one. Lipton explains that scientists have linked a lot of genes to lots of different diseases and traits, but scientists have rarely found that one gene causes a trait or disease. In fact, according to research, only 5% of cancer and cardiovascular patients can attribute their disease to hereditary. And during this study, which was in the early 2000s, quote, "When the media came out with news on the discovery of breast cancer, they failed to emphasize that 95% of breast cancers are not due to inherited genes," unquote. That's a big discovery. Disease is largely due to an alteration of genes from epigenetics, which again is the environment. It's not from the defective genes themselves. So 95% of breast cancer come from the environment, not the genes. And I want to clarify, the environment for the cells in this case is our body. And so it is our thoughts and beliefs, along with the cell's thoughts and beliefs, that are constantly creating an environment within our body for those cells to either thrive or not. Again, it's a micro-macro thing. And I'm going to go on a tangent. Our body is the environment for our cells. And likewise, this acts as our internal environment. Then, of course, we have our external environment. And our beliefs are controlling both our internal and external environment, just as cells create their own internal and external environment. So together, the cell's interpretation works with our human brain's interpretation to create these internal and external environments. And it's all connected and working with each other. So the cell's external environment is the same as our internal environment, which is the physical body. And like cells, our external environment is the same as the collective spirit's internal environment. And so as all of us humans and plants and animals and beings create an external environment with our beliefs, although it may seem separate from us, it can similarly be seen as the internal environment for spirit, God, or creator. And life just mimics itself on larger and larger scales until it engulfs itself back up to a smaller scale. So this scale we can use for research. What's happening on the inside is happening on the outside. As within, so without. As above, so below. This is the rhythmic scale of life itself. This is again another example of what that means. What's happening within our belief systems is going to appear within our reality, because it is our beliefs that create what we perceive. This is why we all live in different realities, because we all have different beliefs. But back to cancer and disease coming from its environment, not its genetics. Lipton states, quote, "Often confusion occurs when the media distorts the meaning of two words, correlation and causation." He says, quote, "It's one thing to be linked to a disease. It's quite another to cause a disease. He gives a good metaphor by explaining, if I show you my keys and say that a particular key controls my car, you at first might think that makes sense because you know you need that key to turn on the ignition. But does the key actually control the car? If it did, you couldn't leave the key in the car alone because it might just borrow your car for a joyride when you are not paying attention. In truth, the key is correlated with the control of the car, but it is the person who turns the key who actually controls the car. So specific genes are correlated with an organism's behavior and characteristics, but these genes are not activated until something triggers them, such as our thoughts and beliefs, which is what he's referring to when he says environment is what triggers and controls genes. So, easier said than done. You're thinking positive, you're changing your beliefs, but nothing's happening. Why? We know our thoughts can change our physicality, but you're thinking positive, you truly believe it, and the outcome is not changing. Well, the thing is, we have to understand that the relationship between the conscious and subconscious mind is not separate, but interconnected. If we have been raised to think with energetically draining thoughts, we have to understand that we have then programmed our subconscious to hold these energetic patterns. So just changing the conscious mind, which is the brain, to thinking positive is not in itself going to create change. Yes, it's a start, and it goes along with staying observant of one's thoughts and beliefs, but we have to begin to not only shift the conscious mind, but also the subconscious mind. And this either takes time or takes honest surrender to this concept, which can shift you faster. And this shift is linked to when people talk about feeling, not just thinking. So we have to learn how to shift from draining beliefs to those of energizing beliefs within our subconscious. We have to learn how to not only change the conscious mind, but we also have to learn how to generate thoughts. And it is the subconscious that is responsible for what we generate. And we know when this starts to happen because we feel it. We don't just think it. Because the subconscious mind is strictly habitual. It will react to how we have trained it to react. And retraining the subconscious is more than just changing surface thoughts. Again, surface thoughts which come from the conscious mind, our physical brain. Lipton states, quote, "When it comes to sheer neurological processing abilities, the subconscious mind is millions of times more powerful than the conscious mind. If the desire of the conscious mind, the brain, conflicts with the programs in the subconscious mind, which do you think will win out? Clearly, our subconscious programming is going to take over." He explains, "You can repeat the positive affirmation that you are lovable over and over, or that your cancer tumor will shrink. But if, as a child, you heard over and over that you are worthless and sickly, those messages programmed in your subconscious mind will undermine your best conscious efforts to change your life." So then, how do we overcome this? Well, here's where we start. We have to surrender to the concept that our beliefs are more powerful than our genes and our upbringing. We have to start here. By definition of this episode, if we don't believe that, we're not going to see any change. However, once we choose to adopt the belief, that belief itself is in control, then we can start doing the work. We can't be a victim of our genetics or our upbringing. Yes, they can play a part in shaping us. Absolutely. But it is our perspective and belief systems that override it all. Our environment is what we decide it is. And based on what we decide, we will begin creating new genes for ourselves. We will begin to reprogram the subconscious mind, which in return will reprogram our conscious mind. So, if this sounds interesting to you, do it. If it doesn't, don't. But just know, whatever you decide, no matter what, is true. It's valid. And it's all created from your belief. If you enjoyed today's episode, I hope that you use it to inspire those around you, and I'll see you next week on In a Spiritual Sense. For those looking to connect further, please feel free to send emails to info@inaspiritualsense.com or hit me up on Instagram, where you can find weekly inspiration and updates. I look forward to connecting with you.